drops off, malathion and diazinon have now shown up. And I'll stress this type of analysis, this is what guides what I'm talking about when I'm talking to applicators. We test for 160 different things. We do often see mixtures of 10 or more different things. This is how we narrow down what I talk about, because I can't talk about 160 different things without people falling asleep. So we have prioritized these things to talk about when we're talking to pesticide applicators. Beyond the watch out, these things are moving at levels that we consider to be concerning. Yes.
Yeah, Abby, I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is, right, the first three things on that list are things that are environmental concern products versus from a use perspective versus malathion and diazinon, which tend to be a human health exposure route.
Yes, they can be. And it's interesting that those are showing up. We don't see chlorpyrifos anymore. Chlorpyrifos dropped off long ago when its use was significantly restricted. One thing I do want to point out, yes, those are two older OPs that are showing up, malathion and diazinon. Diurin has dropped off the list, and because one of the things we found out is that EPA's draft risk assessment for diurin, as it stands right now, linked on the aquatic life benchmark table, has an incorrect value that is 2 digits off. We found out about that correction recently this year, so we are now changing that. And I will say, so the draft risk assessment still has that on. You will only find that it is an incorrect value if you look at the response to comments in which it was pointed out that that was an incorrect calculation. So, but the aquatic life benchmark table just got updated this year, of which I confirmed with several other states, and they saw the same thing. So we're just now seeing that correction on the aquatic life benchmark table. So this is my public service announcement. And that is the reason why that one has dropped off.
So explains now why we thought it was weird that diurin was
like that's curious.
Finding it.
It was always there. I was like, why is it?
By a factor of 100 it was off. So yeah, just next slide, please. Let me I gotta speed up. Okay. PSP, educating listen. I talked about our workshops. So we did one in Walla Walla by request. We also did one in Colfax by request. People are interested in hearing about, and they want their customers also to hear about this. So we have had a couple other requests. Some summary points that we have from these is most people start off with 6 run-up points, especially for those that are dryland farmers. So in the point menu system, you need maybe up to 9, but anywhere from 3, 6, or 9. You might need that for some of the new registrations coming down. So most people in Washington State have. With the drift menu, the mitigations are going to be perhaps more difficult just on the fringes of agricultural land, not necessarily in the middle, because managed areas by this definition does include other cropland. For this particular ecological risk, I know there's other elements that you should not consider other cropland okay to be as a managed area, but in this specific instance is. I always try to tout the fact that all of these best management practices are already being sold as good soil health practices, good just efficacy practices. And so when we go into this menu, I really do try to point that out. Next, we do have some specialty crop block grant funding to pursue gathering cropping system specific resources for people who are looking at the menu. And I will say, people look at this long menu and they get, it's a shock and it's an emotional response, and that it feels overwhelming because it is long. But once most people realize they may be already doing some of these things, the heat in the room goes down a little bit. But there are still some cropping systems, especially those that are annual and irrigated, that may still have some trouble. And so we want to highlight the resources for those cropping systems that are already available. Yeah, next slide. I think that's it. Oh, yes. This is me selling ourselves, and that we are available for teaching these new requirements at your next event. I get people credits when they listen to me, so that's fantastic. And it's relevant for applicators, dealers, and landowners. There are some of these best management practices that really have to deal with physical aspects on the land itself, not only the application parameters. So Yes, we are available. And I think, is that it? I think that might be it. Yep, it is. I can take any questions.
I'm not seeing anything online.
Okay.
Hey, I have a
Anyone in the
question. This is
room?
Felsot. Yeah, question, Abby. When you do the well monitoring, are you doing any other assessment of what's around the well? For example, how close is it to the nearest agricultural field, the ceiling around the well, anything that would give you insight into why there might be a detection?
My understanding that analysis is so far it's been very much summary statistics of what we are finding there and if it's a concern or not for human health and consumption of drinking water. My knowledge on the topic is starting into, well, how long has that water been there and the time of transit from when it could have been used to when it actually shows up the groundwater can be a long time for groundwater. I'm kind of stepping out of my wheelhouse here. We do have available our agricultural land use map that goes back a couple decades now. So that is a great idea to have our groundwater team consider looking at that if you want to track back to what was being used. Right now, I will point out that if there is even nitrate or a concerning level of pesticides, the way to fix that in the short term is reverse osmosis units. And those have been provided to folks who have found that there's levels of something in there that they are concerned about. So that's the short-term fix. As to finding how it got there. Yeah, I'm going to leave that to our groundwater team, and I can get you in touch with Jacqueline Hancock, and you can provide that comment to her and to consider.
They definitely have provided comments back to producers who like to store their very large totes of product right adjacent to their wellhead. So there has been, it definitely has generated conversation for rural landowners where maybe they haven't had education about why storage right there isn't the right location. Because there's some really good pictures, I think, about that hone in on the idea that this was a really big missing program in my mind in the state. And we had tried as a 3-state agency partnership between DOH Ecology and WSDA for years and years to get support for it. And I'm so excited to see it so well received on the landscape. I think one of the barriers to the reception was it not being, WSDA doesn't have a regulatory role in this space. And so it gives them that opportunity to come in as a technical service provider, like a conservation district would or something like that. And so it feels much more friendly. And then, you know, the result has been in the Pasco Basin. I mean, there was a partnership with DOH that provided money to the health department there, and the health department was able to purchase those RO systems for those homeowners that were seeing high levels. And we have done some on-farm training about storage as a result of like literally, I mean, I was just like, I saw this picture. I was like, are we literally sampling the wellhead adjacent to where they're storing all their large totes? And the answer was yes. They literally had built their storage shed for their product directly adjacent to their wellhead. And so if there's even one piece of the casing that isn't functioning properly, you're going to get product potentially there. They might be mixing and loading there too, because they had a spigot. I mean, just all the things, right? So, and they just don't know. So, you know, or they're dumping out rinsing or whatever. Like there's all sorts of things that could be happening, and understanding better. I think there is a lot of on the ground information being provided around like kind of what the wellhead protection area should look like around your casing, where your well is located, and your casing and your pump system. So it has been really good, but Jacqueline has lots more information if you want it, Ellen.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm glad you mentioned the mixing, loading, washing out. We studied this at the University of Illinois when I was there in the 1980s, and that was a big contributor to pesticide pollution as well. So I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you very much.
I mean, I was a little shocked to see that we had so many people with mixing and loading areas right adjacent to their wells, but again, it's some of that's just education that we need to provide there. And it's a quicker fix too.
Thank you for all those updates. Any other quick questions? Now we'll turn it over to Tim Stein for AEZ update.
Last,
Our fourth and final.
I can do it in 5 minutes.
That's fine.
Great.
Not a problem.
That was a high five.
That was
5 minutes because I don't need 20.
I don't need a lot here. So the last of my alphabet soup for the day is the application exclusion zone. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so for those of you that aren't aware, there's the 2015 Federal Worker Protection Standard, or WPS, was updated. It included some new requirements, and one of those requirements is what was called the application exclusion zone, or AEZ. That's the area, as you can see from the diagram, it's surrounding the spray application equipment. This varies on the equipment that you're using. The size will, vary depending on the equipment. But it's a bubble or a circle around the equipment, and the intent is to keep all untrained, unprotected people out of that area, while the application is going on. Keep people clear of that area unless they're properly trained or properly protected. The inclusion of the AEZ in 2015 was intended to supplement, directions that are already out there on the label, such as do not allow this product to contact workers or others directly or through drift. So because labels were not being read and interpreted and followed properly, WPS was padded a little bit with some language that said, hey, this isn't being followed. We're still getting workers and handlers exposed, so we're going to include this AEZ as an aspect. The big point here to point out for everyone in the room and online and out there that will be listening later is, remember, it has never been appropriate prior to the 2015, changes, or after, to allow a pesticide to contact any unprotected person, okay? That's drift, that's human exposure, whether an AEZ exists or whether you followed it or not. If you get pesticide onto somebody, that can be a violation. So keeping that in mind, these are just added hoops, kind of like the ESA stuff. You can't take a protected species. Well, you can't expose a person. These are added rules, within the label confines of the worker protection standard to prevent you from exposing people. So when this came out in 2015, there was a lot, as with most EPA rules and laws, there was a lot of back and forth. There were some interpretations. There was, interim decisions in 2018. Rules at the state level got changed, both at LNI and at WSDA. And then finally, in December of 2024, EPA handed out a final decision, their interpretive decision on what constituted the AEZ, what could be enforced, what couldn't be enforced. And so that resulted in WSDA coordinating, collaborating with LNI to update our rules to meet the final rule, which came out in 2024. So that rulemaking process we have recently completed. We finalized the rule April 21st of this year. It becomes effective on Monday. As a heads up, you've got 3 days notice. What does that mean from a compliance standpoint? Well, as I said earlier, in the earlier slide there, it's never been okay to, thanks, next slide, sorry. It's never been acceptable to drift or allow a pesticide to come in contact with somebody off-site, okay? To contact through drift or by other means. So our compliance approach is that human exposure is and always has been a significant concern. I don't think anybody here would argue that otherwise. Pesticide compliance investigations involving human exposure could result in a civil penalty without issuance of a notice of correction, like I had discussed earlier today. So our compliance program, our inspectors don't do this on their own. They do the inspections, they collect the facts. They then submit that report to an area supervisor who reviews it, discusses those facts with the investigator, and the two of them come up, with a plan of enforcement action. Because it involves human exposures, our policies are to also include a third person, which is our case review officer, which is now our AES division's regulatory lead. So to review all human exposure cases. So in an instance where AEZ was, or maybe wasn't violated, but still came in contact with somebody, it's considered a human exposure. There's 3 sets of eyes that look at that and a 4th that signs the NOI before it goes out. So our compliance approach, AEZ violations identified during an inspection or an investigation where no human exposure has occurred. Let's say that we're driving by and we see an application going on and we see people that are within an AEZ, okay? The drift is blowing away from somebody. They're not, they're not in any danger of being exposed, but they're still inside the AEZ. Is that a violation? It is. That's something that could be handled through, advisory letters or a notice of correction, a suitable warning. We expect most of our complaints that involve investigations to morph into something a little bit more like the human exposure. Did they violate the AEZ? Did they not? So we intend to continue conducting routine inspections. They may reveal an AEZ violation, but most of the violations are expected to arise from complaints that turn into investigations. So the QR code available on the screen there is information regarding the recent rule update, takes you to our rules page. You can find out more information there on the AEZ updates. Any questions on that? That summarizes it for me. Did I do 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Perfect.
this is Felside again.
Yeah, get in line, Alan. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Alan. You're online. We'll go ahead.
Unless something's changed in the last 2 years, there's no mention of the AZ on a label. Is that going to change? Because it's an obscure part of the worker protection standard that you can only find by reading the Code of Federal Regulations. So, I mean, several products. Yeah, several years ago, I gave an extension talk to differentiate AZ from a no spray buffer zone, which is on the label. The latter is. So what,
WPS.
How do workers know about this if they don't get it through their certification training?
Well, that's exactly where they're going to get it through. So Jeff was speaking earlier on the WPS, on the handler training, on the worker training that they do. They talk about the AEZ in their training. We discussed that at length here over the last couple of years with the AEZ changes. It's all morphed into the worker protection standard training. So when you go to the pesticide labels, anything that appears in that agricultural use box, it says refer to 40 CFR or the worker protection standard. That's where the label reference is. It doesn't specifically spell out what an AEZ is because you might be able to apply the pesticide, in different types of equipment at different, levels. And Jeff has a comment on that too.
The other thing is states are different too. Oregon is like 150 feet if you're using a respirator. If you're not, it's 100. So theirs is a little bit different than, let's say, ours is.
Correct.
It would be hard for them to put that on a.
Well, they also don't tell you where decon is on the label.
So Jeff brings up another good point, Alan, is that, states are different. So, Oregon's a little bit different depending on the PPE that you have, what their buffer zone is, because it's written into state rules. Washington has, 16223, which is, that's the Department of Ag's WPS rules. If you go over to Idaho, they follow the federal rule. They don't have a state WPS code. So it has to all go back to that ag use box. And our rules reference that ag use box. That ties us into our RCWs and WACs. Does that explain that?
Yeah, no, I'll comment that Oregon also has a time limitation on how long that AEZ is effective. Even though the AEZ is a moving target, they've also imposed a time limitation. I didn't know anything about an AEZ until about 5 years ago when I had a consulting contract for a public utility that might raise a conflict with farming there. And in the open commentary on the reports and everything, the public hearings, people raised the issue of the AEZ, and that's when I learned that Oregon did have a time element that they added that was not in the federal Code of Federal Regulations. So I'm aware that it is different among states.
Oregon has some different rules. They've also had some shelter in place requirements, that they have to change because of the federal rule change. So I don't know all the details of theirs, but they do have some rules that are a little bit different than ours and that are different than the federal requirement. So they're all having to be updated as of December of 24.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We had another question.
Yeah, just on that the very last slide.
Yeah.
There. It
You want to
seemed
back
to
up?
be an inconsistency between the second box down where it says you left issue a notice of correction then you read the last box where it says, well, if there's a violation, we'll figure out what's appropriate and then do it. Or is that, maybe that's
Means
just
by
the way I'm reading it.
I think you mean exemption, it's exception when there's a human health potential and some other things. So that's where that bullet.
That is a very poor, I will chastise the person who drafted this. Yes, I have been sufficiently chastised. So this was a shortened version of what we provided to the Tree Fruit Association. It was some bullet points there, and that was just a typo in the bullet point I pulled out. So yeah, we can deal with non-human exposure issues by a suitable, yeah. What that was saying is we have to issue, that was the 4305, the RCW 4305, which says, for first time violations, we have to issue an NOC.
If there's exposure.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Just-
yeah, or there's exceptions to that. If it's human exposure, then we can bump that to an NOI. So thank you for that catch.
Question, Tim.
Go ahead, Bradley.
Did you want to address the change that WSDA made regarding emergency washing facilities?
Well, that didn't spell out AEZ or AES, but yes, one of the things that we incorporated with the AEZ rule change was just to come in line with labor and industries was the eyewash standards. Under WPS, a suitable water supply, it didn't have any specifications on volume. It just had to be safe for your eyes. Labor and Industries has very specific standards on their eyewash stations about how much water is delivered, what the quality of that water is, where it comes from. Under WSDA, we've always paralleled the WPS requirements with L&I. But a couple of years ago, we found some language barriers there that didn't, we were citing a section that was actually under L&I. So what we did is by reference, just bring in the L&I requirements into ours. That way it's the same across the board, whether an L&I person visits a farm or we visit a farm. They're the same.
Thanks for.
Thank you, Bradley, for bringing that up too. That was kind of a minor addition in there just to bring the two rules into compliance with each other. Consistency.
And, those individuals that may have experienced enforcement action or even consultation in the past between the two agencies, they may have experienced that misalignment.
Mhm.
So it is nice to have that consistency as we, consistently enforce the same WPS requirements across the state.
Anything else?
Chat.
Brenda, guess so?
Thank you. I don't see anything. Do you see anything on chat? I don't. No one in the room? Okay, thank you.
To Kelly McLean for Pasco updates.
Yeah. And I don't think Lauren's online. I didn't see her earlier. I checked just a little bit, unless she's on there and she can be. No, I think it's just me. She was at the Climate Resilience Council this morning, so I'm sure she's just been busy in meetings. So I'm going to give an update on the Pesticide Application Safety Committee, which is another statutorily required group that exists here in Washington. This group actually met 2 days ago. So Pasco met 2 days ago. So a couple of updates. The last update that we gave to the board, to this board, was October 16th of last year. Since then, we met in November and we met again this week for that group. That group is specifically focused on minimizing human exposure to pesticides and improving pesticide application safety and making recommendations to the 3 main agencies that do that work. So L&I, Department of Health, and Department of Agriculture. So that's the purpose of that group. It has legislators on it. I co-chair it with Lauren Jenks from the Department of Health. During the 2025 legislative session, the PASCO group was extended through July 1st of 2035. So originally that group had been formed pre-COVID. And we for the state and we kind of formulated what the work would look like going forward. It had a sunset clause in it that would have ended the group in 2025, and instead it was extended. So now we have work through 2035, and we're actually working on an 8-year plan in that group. we're working on developing, the plan itself will be better focused on the activities and the discussions and the actions that we're focused on addressing associated with pesticide applications and human exposure. There have been quite a few turnover vacancy issues at DOH. They're in a significant budget shortfall and going through a really tough time, we feel, for our partners at DOH. And so as a result of that work, there's been some slowdown on the work that the PASCO committee has been doing. That being said, we're in the works, and I think that probably close to the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, we will see some of those vacancies filled through the reversion and bump process, through the layoff process at DOH. And so they'll be moving forward with DOH-based improvements and work as soon as that happens. But until then, they're stretched really, really thin. So a couple of the activities that we're working on and following, a couple of the activities that I wanted to provide updates on include, we've been working hard for the last year and a half, actually 2 years almost, on a shared data set amongst the three agencies. So we received the results of a joint legislative audit and review committee JLARC audit in 2024, and it identified some specific things that they would like to see LNI, DOH, and WSDA do together to improve the sharing of that data, but also to better align that data so the data sets across the three agencies can be compared more easily, because they are really, really different data sets around human exposures. And the findings are often really different. And so trying to find where those things align. So all of that's focused on acute illness pesticide investigations and the relationship the three agencies have together. We're working on updating, with a bunch of support from WSDA, the legislative report format and content. So the report that was actually due May 1st of this year because of delays at DOH isn't out yet, and it'll be out in the fall. So that will be on the new format, and then we'll have a report in the spring that'll be on the new format. And Delina and Annika at DOH have been working on that together. We have been really supportive of the Agricultural Leadership Development Program, and the ALP, unfortunately, is last class day is tomorrow, right? So the last class of ALP is tomorrow. There has not been funding to support that in this budget conundrum that we're facing in Washington State. The curriculum still exists, the trained people still exist. We have seen some amazing results across the spectrum from the people that have participated in those programs and have gone back to their farms and their families with new skills that they didn't have, and make them better workers and better, in some cases, better breadwinners for their family and better partners. So really sad to see that program sit on pause for a while until we identify whether or not there's a long-term funding source that can help support like non-full-time WSDA and DOH and other staff doing it full-time too. It was a second full-time job for a lot of people. It was just not possible to sustain that ongoing. And then we have an advisory committee that we continue to have a challenge of getting all those positions filled. We're hoping to include as much as we can people from different levels within the farm business operation, so that we get really good feedback on specific content questions. So when we have a specific topic area, the goal is to use this advisory work group to kind of ground truth what solutions or possibilities would be to try to solve the problem. And so that's more nimble than anything we could possibly do with a legislatively convened, agency co-chaired, legislative member-based committee. So we are eager to reboot the advisory work group and have them tackle some of the things that we have with a standing list of topics that are associated with human health exposure. The other thing I wanted to add, in addition to the shared data set across the agencies, is that the team in TSEP that Jeff's here representing today has been working really hard with the three agencies on identifying opportunities to even further streamline the data sets that are collected, and where there are differences or gaps, especially because not every investigation results in all three agencies being involved, that we gather some of the same information regardless of who's doing it. And that will help us ideally further refine and identify root cause issues, and then we can create training modules to help address the root causes. So the goal is that the trainings that we do on the ground for farm workers, handlers, and others becomes more robust and powerful. And as a result, we see fewer human health exposures that could have been avoided. So excited about that as well. If you're ever interested, the meeting recordings and packets are available on the DOH website for Pasco, and literally it is named Pasco, like the town. And so sounds like I'm just going to update you on city and the Tri-Cities, but it is an actual committee. So happy to answer any questions about it, but that's the lion's share of what we're doing in Pasco. That group meets 3 times a year. So, and it is, and then does a legislative report as part of their work. So, questions?
Great timing.
And it does help that it's fresh. We just did it 2 days. It can't be too far out.
We had similar tech issues.
We did have
Different.
similar tech It was a Zoom-based tech issue in a state building, but you know, I don't think it matters. I think it's just state agencies.
It was a complete experience.
Yes. So that's it.
Nothing in the chat.
Awesome. Okay. We'd love to have people participate in Pasco. If you're interested in human health exposure, if you're interested in the data sets, if you're interested in the things you can do to get engaged on the topic of how we continue to ideally reduce the amount of human health exposure and pesticide applications that cause problems, we would, you know, you're always welcome. That's a totally open and public group. So please participate.
I was just gonna mention too, Kelly, I know like, was it? Maybe last year, I'm getting old, my timeline gets a little.
I only remember stuff because it was 2 days ago.
We did a significant training with Department of Health,
Mhm.
training them on,
Yeah, it was last year.
last year, training them on questions to ask, what to look for,
Right.
understanding PPE, understanding equipment, understanding, you know, all that type of stuff, so that as they do their investigation, hopefully they generate reports that are more user friendly, you know, like they may say, you know, a worker was but it wasn't a worker, it was a handler, you know, or
Right, which
they were
changes
driving
how
a tractor and it's like, did the tractor have a cab? Was it open? Was it
Right.
closed? Was it, you know, what I mean, so just a lot of little details and things we had to talk to them about so that they maybe had a little bit better understanding on how to conduct those investigations. That was a result, I believe, of the Pasco meeting.
It was, yeah, it was definitely a result of the Pasco meeting. And I also think, I mean, I think what we have really realized, and I think it came out pretty strongly in the JLARC audit, was that each of the 3 agencies have really unique roles that are identified in statute and required. And there's not going to be a lot of deviation from that. LNI has a specific role that they play when they go out and do an investigation, as does WSDA. Our work is focused around the label. The work that LNI is doing is focused around worker protection standards, as well as the OSHA and WSHA requirements that exist. You know, it's an employer-employee related relationship. And then DOH is getting their data set. They're getting even the referrals come from someplace completely different oftentimes than where we get ours from. And so, you know, if they're looking at it through a medical acute illness and an exposure route, some of it is questions like, do we have enough information to draw back to, could this have been prevented if they had decontaminated on the farm? Did they know where the decontamination was? Was it clearly marked? Did they understand why it was so dangerous for them to get in their car and drive an hour and then decontaminate at home, and what that meant? Because now you just contaminated 3 different pathways, right? So figuring out how to make those pieces sync up so that our trainings are our trainings are better. We have data that can actually be, because we don't ever expect that the DOH data, for instance, is going to perfectly align with LNI's or WSDA's. That's not the goal. The goal is to identify, are there categories of information where if LNI goes out and WSDA goes out and they have 5 categories in 20 that overlap and we have the exact same information, what does that tell us? Right? So it's like, we're not missing things that might have been easily grabbed and could help us explain how to do this better. So, and the whole point of that group has been focused on, the impetus to create Pasco was really focused around, we had a couple of extreme exposure events in between 2015 and 2018 that led to the creation of Pasco, where 75 workers are exposed to an aerial application in a pesticide field and they were in the adjacent orchard. an air blast sprayer, and, exposure from an air blast sprayer and drift. And so, where we had significant numbers of people exposed. And so the goal is to identify, are there ways for us not to change pesticide application if it's following the label, but to make it all safer so that the people that are out there using products are safe and the people around them are safe. And so how do we do that? It's a great group. I'm glad that it got extended. I'm excited to get us rebooted with more resources in the fall. There's a lot to talk about in the human exposure space.
Thank you. We're gonna just another request for putting your pesticide applicator license and your name, because there's a couple of unknown users. If you could please, if you're looking for pesticide credits, and then we can move on to public comment, which is scheduled for 2:30, so we're right on time.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you.
There's
We
nobody
do-
signed in.
There's no one signed in.
Is there anybody online though?
We're gonna double check. If you're interested in public comment and you could sign in, requesting that, I do see license numbers showing up, so that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Tina, specifically, the program manager of the licensing program. We can get you your credits.
Hey, you know what? I still need credits. We all need credits. It's not like it goes away. You just continuing.
We don't get credits for speaking.
You do not, I know, which is why I don't have a license anymore, because I always was at my own speaking engagement. I couldn't get enough credits though.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you, Kylie, for all of your due diligence work in this.
I see no one signing in for comment.
Do you want to talk a little bit about moving locations?
Oh, yes. So seeing we've had substantial issues with the Wi-Fi here, we're thinking about potentially moving this to Ellensburg.
Where we have solid Wi-Fi.
Anybody opposed to that? I know that, a little further for some people, but still a pretty centralized area.
A little closer for some of us too.
Yeah.
It's 25 minutes down the road.
I know it's only 25 minutes further. And we're guaranteed at the Cattlemen's Association to have a space as big as we need, but also to have
Wi-Fi.
dependable Wi-Fi.
There's a beautiful rest area between here and on the other. So.
I want to give a shout out to my iPhone for having a hotspot that could run this meeting. So
It works better. It's Verizon.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. We got the computers, and phone on it.
Yeah, it is.
It's a beautiful little spot, and so far they haven't closed it. So I'm I think supporting the Forest Service, staying here in Cleveland. But yeah, no, we do need a more reliable signal. So I don't know.
For the hybrid part.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Yeah. Yeah, because there are a lot of people online and we really appreciate you being able to participate. So
And you're
Thank you for your patience.
yeah, thank you so much. It's hard.
Do people want the fall meeting to be a hybrid meeting as well? Last year we did it online. You guys like the idea of us still having the opportunity to come in person if we can? I think there's just a lot more interaction.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so we'll get with Kevin. Once we get a doodle pulled out on dates. So, okay.
I don't see any comments.
Unless your advisory committee.
Thank you for the lively comments today, interactions and input to Department of Agriculture. It's really important.
So other than that, people, are we gonna doodle poll for the next date?
Mhm.
We're thinking likely the second Wednesday in October.
Okay.
I'm only thinking that because we have a meeting in Ellensburg at the Cattlemen's on the second Thursday in October.
That is efficient.
And we could just do the Wednesday,
Wow.
Thursday, and combine the meetings with, because we have a bunch of people that have to travel to those.
That's not during a holiday week, is it?
It's right before, no, because it'd be like,
Okay.
it's probably the 13th and 14th, and it's right before hunting season.
Okay.
You're right, it is.
I need to make sure.
Let's watch on that Thursday, because I know we're right.
It's like what happened this season, paper thin, there's a paper thin margin between.
I
hunting
was thinking
season.
of Labor Day. I was like, it's a hunting season, that's the holiday.
Our office, there are certain criteria you have to meet. You don't try to. Is there anything else that we've got?
No, I don't see anything else coming in, and any other closing comments or?
Anything else? Once again, thank you very much, and we'll adjourn this meeting.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Oh,